Hi, my name is Dan LeBrier. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Compliance and Investigations at the Division of Workers' Compensation. Recently, my fraud team sat down to brainstorm ideas about what are the most effective methods of combating fraud in the workers' compensation system. We kept coming back to the same idea, that idea being that the early detection of fraudulent schemes is our most powerful and effective tool in the fight against fraud. So we made the following training video with early detection in mind for one key audience, and that's going to be the claims adjuster. These are the people that are encountering these schemes at the ground level on a day-to-day basis. And our thoughts are that if we get information out there into the hands of adjusters, we will more quickly identify these fraudulent schemes, have them reported, have them investigated, and ultimately brought to an end. So I hope you find the following video helpful and informative, as we have 3 of our most seasoned investigators here at DWC to give you some real-world insight into their experiences investigating these fraudulent schemes.
Hello, my name is Jamie Allen, and I am the Director for the Texas Division of Workers' Compensation Fraud Unit. Today's presentation will focus on building awareness around fraud and strengthening our ability to prevent it. We'll begin with an overview of common fraud schemes in workers' compensation, followed by key red flags to watch out for. Next, we'll discuss practical fraud prevention strategies, and finally, we'll walk through how we do intake processing. By the end of the session, you should feel more confident in identifying potential fraud and responding appropriately. Let's start with a general definition of fraud: an intentional misrepresentation to obtain a financial benefit. Let's break that down. Intentional. This means the individual meant to do it. The conduct or outcome was not accidental or unplanned. Intent can apply either to what the person does or what result they want to happen. In criminal law, intentional conduct represents the highest level of culpability because the person deliberately chose the action or outcome. Here are some synonyms for intentional, and you may have heard these on shows like Law and Order: premeditated, calculated, intended. So for fraud, we have to have intent, where the person made a conscious choice. But next, a misrepresentation, or essentially a lie. A person must make a conscious choice to lie. So to have fraud, it's an intentional misrepresentation for a financial benefit. This includes a loss of money. If no financial damage occurs, such as when a false statement is discovered before any loss happens, the conduct may be attempted, but it does not meet the legal threshold for a criminal fraud prosecution. There must be a financial loss. Here are some common fraud schemes that we're going to talk about today. We're going to go over employer, healthcare, claimant, and beneficiary fraud. Understanding these common schemes can help organizations identify red flags and protect the integrity of the workers' compensation system. Senior Investigator Nathan Sartorius will go over employer fraud schemes.
Hello, I'm Nathan Sartorius, Senior Fraud Investigator at Division of Workers' Compensation. Today I will be speaking to you about common employer fraud schemes. Common employer fraud schemes in workers' compensation often center on reducing worker compensation premium costs through inaccurate reporting. These schemes undermine the workers' compensation system and often result in penalties, back premiums, and criminal charges when discovered. Let's take a closer look at employer schemes. Payroll fraud occurs when an employer underreports payroll, pays employees off the books, or fails to include overtime bonuses, so premiums are lower than what they should be. Let me give you a real-world example. A mid-sized construction company reported an annual payroll of $750,000 to its workers' compensation insurance carrier on their application for coverage. This construction company paid insurance premiums based on this figure. At audit, the owner provided payroll records, tax filings, and their contracts for the year. During this audit, the insurer noticed inconsistencies between payroll records, tax filings, and numbers of workers observed at the job sites. A deeper investigation revealed that the employer had been paying multiple employees in cash and issuing some payments through a separate, undisclosed account. The company's true payroll was $2 million. Ask questions. Dig deeper. Remember to prove fraud. There must be misrepresentation if the employer answers honestly, the premiums are calculated correctly. Social media can sometimes lead investigators to interesting findings. While a single post or picture does not prove that a business committed fraud, it can serve as an indicator and provide a reason to investigate further. The company faced criminal charges, restitution was ordered to be paid, and even cancellations of their insurance policy. This case shows how underreporting payroll may save money short-term, but leads to serious legal and financial consequences. Between 2014 and 2017, an owner of multiple courier business obtained workers' compensation coverage for 2 of his businesses. No reported interchange of labor, reported payroll. Company 1, $40,000 yearly. Company 2, $60,000 yearly. At audit, interchange of labor was identified by at least 12 courier companies operating out of the same address. In 2025, a company pled guilty to fraudulently obtaining workers' compensation insurance. The company misrepresented material information to obtain coverage, leading to criminal liability under Texas workers' compensation insurance laws. This case demonstrates how employers who falsely secure and maintain workers' comp coverage, whether by misrepresenting payroll, claim history, or other required facts, can face serious financial and legal consequences. Here are some things you as an adjuster can keep an eye out for to indicate possible payroll fraud. Does claimant dispute employer's reported average weekly wage? Look for missing inconsistent payroll records. Does claimant mention large amounts of overtime? Cash payments. Did injury occur after hours but no overtime reported for average weekly wage? Large business revenue with unusually low payroll. Misclassification involves labeling employees as independent contractors or assigning them to lower risk job classifications. Even though their actual duties involve higher risk, this lowers premium rates. Let's look at common workers' compensation fraud scenarios. An employer reported payroll for only 2 clerical employees, while claiming that 30 roofers were independent contractors. Because roofers are higher risk classification, this misclassification exposes the insurer to significantly higher risk than what was reported. The policyholder is controlling how, when, or where work is done. The worker is not an independent contractor. The roofers did not qualify as independent contractors and should have been classified as employees. This example highlights why adjusters, auditors should carefully verify job descriptions to detect potential fraud. A landscaping company reported 2 clerical staff and a part-time landscape gardener on payroll. Landscaping gardening is described as groundskeeping, lawn care and tree work without elevation, not doing work off the ground. The part-time gardener suffered a severe leg injury from falling off a 45-foot ladder and cutting his leg with a chainsaw. Landscape gardening is very different from elevated tree trimming. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the company was operating a tree trimming business and had several employees performing both landscaping and tree work, which was underreported to the insurance company. With the use of a bucket truck and ladders, and especially a 45-foot ladder, this is no longer a general landscaping classification. It should have been reported as a higher risk code to properly cover the work being done. Additionally, the employee was a full-time worker, not part-time, making more than $5,000 annually. Clerical workers are very low risk job classification code, representing sedentary, desk-based work with minimal physical hazards. To save money on premiums, employers may indicate most of their staff are clerical workers. Paying less in workers' compensation premiums means less upfront costs of doing business. So if an employer, say a construction company, is able to save money on their workers' compensation premiums by misrepresenting their payroll, they may be able to underbid other companies who are operating legitimately and win contracts. When it comes to misclassification of fraud, there are several red flags to watch for. Injuries that don't match the job description. Injuries occurring on job site versus office. Injuries reported on independent contractors, but claimant reports using company tools and wearing the uniform. Workers paid in cash. Medical records indicating higher physical demand levels. Recognizing these signs helps prevent fraud and protects both employees and insurers. Non-subscriber to subscriber fraud happens when an employer owns multiple companies, possible obtaining coverage on a smaller or lower risk company. When an employee of the non-subscriber is injured, the owner moves the injured employee to the company with workers' compensation coverage. A boutique gym and a personal trainer studio was owned by Derek. Owner obtained coverage for his boutique gym, reporting payroll of approximately $550,000. for sales and personnel, personal trainers, and desk staff. A worker is reportedly injured from falling off scaffolding, which is something that normally happens at a gym or by activities performed by a personal trainer. The worker reports he works for Derek's company. Information provided on the first report of injury shows that this is a one-off repair job at the gym due to an expansion project. His job title is Facilities Assistant, and his employment started 3 weeks ago. Derek completed and signed the first report of injury and submitted it to the insurance company. A review of documents on the claim and further interview with the injured employee indicated that he was not an employee of the gym, but of a construction business, also owned by Derek. The employee had been working jobs through Derek's construction business for many years, and the construction company did not have workers' compensation coverage. To avoid liability, Derek reported the injury through his covered business, the gym. An online search identified the construction business, and permits were found online through open source information indicating the residential address where the employee was injured. There are red flags that may indicate employer fraud in the Texas workers' compensation system. The employee makes vague statements like, "I work for Derek's company," or the information provided about their employment or wages does not match what is reported by the employer. Ask the employee to describe a normal day. Where do you report? Who assigned their work? Look for inconsistencies between the claim, reported injury information, and the employer's actual operations. Employee was injured while working at a boutique gym, but he fell off a scaffolding. Request pay stubs from injured employees, which could show different employer's name. Is there any other high-risk labor on a low-risk policy? Review business purpose and scope. Why would gym employees be doing construction? Double-check owner's name, business, address, or phone numbers online. Do other businesses have the same address? Does the business have multiple locations? Now, Investigator Lee Sodick is going to discuss healthcare fraud in the workers' compensation system. Recognizing these signs helps ensure the system remains fair and protects both employees and insurers.
All right, my name is Lee Sodick. I'm with the DWC Fraud Unit, and right now I'm going to talk to you about healthcare fraud. 4 schemes that we commonly see: billing for services not provided, overbilling, unlicensed techs providing services, and durable medical equipment fraud, or DME. Right now we'll start with healthcare fraud for billing for services not provided. Here's an example of billing for services not provided. We partnered with the FBI where we did a case where the doctor was in Arlington. He billed for physical therapy that he was not performing himself. The investigation reviewed multiple years of billing data and interviewed patients. Some of the patients said that their wait to see the doctor was extensively long, time spent with the doctor was very short, or the doctor never examined me at all. As a result of the investigation with the federal partners, the outcome was he served 12 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and was ordered to pay over $376,000 in restitution. But we can combat this. Here's what we can keep an eye out for so you can recognize and help us prevent this fraud. Services billed don't match the records. Records indicate the exact same vitals for multiple appointments, i.e. my blood pressure is never exactly the same. Notes are copy and paste for multiple appointments in a row, and we have seen it rarely actually billing for a deceased person. All these by themselves don't indicate fraud or mean fraud, but they can be an indicator so that you can help us prevent it. Let's go to overbilling. Overbilling procedures are when the doctor bills for excessive times, number of procedures, higher cost, or higher cost of the procedure bills at a higher than the contracted price, i.e. it should cost $350, but the doctor bills it for $700, way overcharging the amount that is agreed on by contract. Here's a real-life example from the Texas workers' comp. An injured employee was approved for 3 weeks of PT, or physical therapy. However, when the bill was submitted, the provider charged for 2 hours of the appointment, but the patient who contacted their adjuster reported that there was much less time spent with the doctor for each visit. This is considered fraud because the bill is inflated. And these types of issues are often detected when insurance companies notice patterns of excessive billing. Here's something to keep an eye out for. Records don't support the billed services. Boilerplate copied and pasted appointments. Let's look at the date, hand jammed, and let's look at the last line, especially since it has gotten a lot colder recently in Texas. Don't know about you, but I don't think it gets colder in Texas in the month of June. Oh, but wait, it gets worse. Here's another copy of pasted. Notice the notes don't change, the dates change. However, it's still getting colder in June, July, and now in August. And I don't know if you've been in Texas in August, it's not cold. But a claim adjuster paying attention actually reported this. In of itself, is it fraud? Maybe, maybe not. Could be just their poor record keepers. Could be somebody else doing the notes for the doctor. However, with that said, it's an indicator and it should be looked at and flagged for us. Here's another thing to keep an eye out for: templated forms. Now, with templated forms, it's for the ease of the doctor or the healthcare provider so they can actually make changes and knock it out quickly. But look at this one: diagnosis. Knee is a body part, not a diagnosis. And then when you have little check marks where you can easily check it and fill it out, it's easy to commit fraud because they just keep checking and keep filling it out. Another thing to keep an eye out for: stamped or copied signatures. Like in this case, this signature was photocopied several times. All the A's and the B's and the D's crossed at the same time. It leads to believe that the form was pre-signed and then photocopied multiple times. Again, in of itself, is it fraud? Not necessarily, but it's an indicator, should be flagged for your SIU or for us to look into. Let's move on to unlicensed tech and other individuals providing services. Now, unlicensed techs, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in the doctor's office. That just means that they're not doctors or licensed healthcare providers and shouldn't be working or unsupervised. They can assist with doctors or other healthcare providers, but shouldn't be the ones billing unless they're licensed to bill and charge for that test. Let's look at an example of an unlicensed individual. Manual testing, MMT, was performed on the treating doctor's office during a visit to assess the response to physical therapy. The injured employee had a shoulder injury. He was approved for physical therapy and reports no improvement. But a phone call with the adjuster, the injured employee let the adjuster know that I was not alone with the doctor. The doctor actually left and another person came in and performed the test. A person can assist a doctor with the test, but the doctor should be the one doing the treatment and the billing. The patient reported that the testing was explained as a range of motion and strength test, and he left the room. And the patient did not know the results, but he still had pain. But again, the doctor wasn't in the room when the test was performed. But the doctor charged like he was. Not only did this doctor do this on this one, he continued to do it for a tune of $300,000 for MMTs that he did not conduct himself. And this little statement was attached to the billing statement showing that he actually signed it, John H., and he was a tech that did the service, not the actual doctor himself. What we can do to combat it, what to keep an eye out for: signatures on the records don't match the billing statement. The injured employee indicates that someone else conducted the procedure. You can verify the license number of the provider by looking it up through the Texas Licensing Board. Here's another example of handwriting records not consistent with the signature. Unusual signatures or credentials. Notice on this one it says CA. We actually had to look that up because I had never heard of it before in my life. It's for chiropractic assistant. When we asked what that was, they actually admitted, well, there's no such thing as a chiropractic assistant, we just made it up. But they put it on their form. Again, in of itself, is it fraud? We don't know. But let us know or let someone know, raise a red flag, and let us look into it. DME, or durable medical equipment. It is equipment that is not needed or not provided. This is when medical equipment is needed for certain procedures or after the procedure, such as muscle stimulators or wound vacuums and things of that nature. However, the fraud comes into play when you can't turn off the durable medical equipment, and usually after the procedure is done or the need for that medical equipment is done. And let's look at an example of some DME fraud. We received an allegation that an injured worker continued to receive accessories for DME that he no longer needed or used. He hadn't been to his treating doctor in quite some time and had not been able to get the supply company to stop sending him the batteries and the wires. His insurance company continued to receive bills for these items. After we reviewed the data, it continued billing for this injured worker and many others beyond the time frame ordered by the doctor. Patients actually stated that in the interviews that they were continuing to receive batteries or other accessories for DME that they no longer used. But we can combat this. Here's what you can keep an eye out for: charges for equipment not received by the patient, equipment billed that is not received, high-cost equipment billed without a medical evaluation or proper documentation, prescriptions from someone other than the treating doctor or outside the geographical area
of the injured employee. And this is big in workers' comp because it should be coming from their treating doctor or somebody already approved by the insurance company. And billing continues beyond the time frame of what is ordered. Now, let's move on to claimant fraud. There are three main components to claimant fraud, and here's some common claimant fraud schemes: working and drawing, malingering, and false claims. Working and drawing happens when the claimant begins to work a different job post-injury, and they earn wages or income while receiving temporary income benefits. The claimant lies about working and earning additional income. However, when we look at working and drawing, we have to look at four main components during our investigation. Average weekly wage. It is exactly what it says. The average weekly wage that that person is making prior to the injury for the company that they're working for. Pre-injury employment. That means the employment they had prior to the injury that happened. You can have a second job in workers' comp. You can have multiple jobs and multiple sources of income, but you have to report it to the claims adjuster. So it's not illegal to have a job, but you have to report it. And then that job, if there's a second, third job, or other alternate source of employment, you need to report it as it should be included in average weekly wage. Next is restrictions. This is the doctor's restrictions that he gives a worker about what he can and can't do and how he can and can't work, or if he can work at all. And then the knowledge and responsibilities. This is the claim adjuster or someone from the insurance company letting the injured worker know that, hey, if you have additional income or start earning additional income, you have to let us know. Again, you can have multiple sources of income as long as it's reported. And I'll give you an example of that. If a person's working in a warehouse and it's a very physical job and he gets injured for that employer and he goes on temporary income benefits, he can do that. He might have a second job that's not as physical where he already had that job prior to his injury, and maybe it's his own computer company. He can still work that job as long as he's not violating his restrictions and he already let the claims adjuster know that, hey, I have a second job. It should be counted in his average weekly wage. What the worker cannot do is make more money on that second job now that he's freed up from his first job where he got injured. When you're a claim adjuster, don't accuse, but ask a question. Are you working or earning any income right now? You can preface it with whatever you want. It must be tough not having any income. The goal should be to get an honest answer and properly calculate the ongoing indemnity benefits. Honesty means correct wage calculations, but lies can lead to possible fraud charges. Lies by omission. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Are you working or earning any income right now? This is an actual question from an actual claim adjuster in an actual case. And the answer from the injured worker. Right now I'm sitting on my couch. Did he lie? No. Did he omit the fact of whether or not he was actually earning an income? He danced around it by saying, right now I'm sitting on my couch. This should have prompted another question. Okay, you're sitting on your couch right now, but are you working any jobs where you are earning any additional income? That answer was taken. There was no follow-up questions, which made it really hard for us to prove that he lied on purpose. Let's look at an actual real-world example of working and drawing. The claimant worked as a bus driver in an independent school district in North Texas. He sustained a legitimate knee injury. After that injury, he began receiving temporary income benefits or TIBs, supplementing his income that he was losing after his injury. However, during the time that he was injured, he moved to Oklahoma. And when he moved to Oklahoma, he started another job as a driver, a very light job, actually violating his restrictions. As the doctor said, as part of his work restrictions, he cannot drive. But the claim adjuster, who was paying attention, became suspicious as she couldn't get a hold of him but only certain times of the day. Maybe he had a different job, maybe not. But what she did do is flagged it, let the SIU know that there was something suspicious, and then the SIU started their investigation and then turned it over to us. But during that time, the claim adjuster was sent an email by the injured employee stating that he didn't have any income and was missing his temporary income benefits and needed that as he wasn't working and needed to feed his family. Claim adjuster flagged that email and then kept it, in which we used later in our investigation. In fact, not only was he doing a light job, he was making more money in his job in Oklahoma than he was as a bus driver in North Texas. Malingering is when a claimant exaggerates their symptoms. They lie about their ability during doctor's appointments so they can remain off work. They make it worse than what it is. I injured my finger, but now my elbow hurts, which made it go to my shoulder, but now it throws my hips off and my knee is all messed up, which makes my left ankle, I can't use it. Here, the claimant's hands were pinned in the gap of the machine for 5 minutes. The injured employee reported to his doctor that there was pain and weakness in my hands. Not only was there pain and weakness in my hands, I can't do stuff on a daily basis that I need to do. To include, told the doctor he was having difficulty gripping, even doing stuff like going to the bathroom. So the doctor says, you can't do anything like lift or push or pull anything above 5 pounds. However, with that said, let's watch the video. As you can see in the video, he lifts more than 5 pounds. In fact, he was grabbing a 45-pound plate and lifting it above his head. The claim adjuster, when he addressed this, he told the claim adjuster, yeah, I go to the gym, but I only walk on a treadmill. The video doesn't lie. Is this in itself fraud? No, but coupled with other things that we can put together, it's a big, huge piece of evidence that contradicts what the injured employee is claiming. However, all cases are different. In this example, the claimant reported he stood up from a squatting position, hit his head, falling to his knees. He reported that his mid-back pain was 6 out of 10 and described a burning with associated soreness and stiffness and radiating from his low back to his knees. And it diminished his capacity to carry on out his daily activities. The doctor put him on restrictions. The job was physical and demand level, medium to heavy. He had headaches, mid to low back pain, and he was given no lifting over 10 pounds, no kneeling, and no bending. However, let's watch the video. Now, is this a good example of malingering? We don't really know based on the video. It really doesn't show everything we need to know. But it's an indicator, and I'll give you an example. How much does the basket weigh? Is it over 10 pounds? Did you observe the claimant bend or kneel? Kind of really couldn't see. And what would the doctor say about his ability to work based on this video? Nothing wrong with taking that video down and showing it to his treating doctor and say, hey, is he violating his restrictions, right? So this video alone doesn't say, hey, this is fraud, but it's a clear indicator that something needs to be said or flagged, and that's where you come in. False claims is an injury that didn't occur at all, or an injury that could have occurred outside of work, but not reported as an on-the-job injury, otherwise not in course and scope. And here we have probably not in the course and scope of anybody's job unless your job is just really fun. Here's some red flags that you can use to combat all claimant fraud. Late reported injury. The injury happened on a Friday, but the claimant didn't report till a Monday, well after what they did all weekend. Who knows? Went to Disneyland, went to a ball game, went surfing. You don't know, but they reported the injury late. No witnesses. Very rarely, unless you work by yourself or on a remote site, do you not have potential witnesses. Inconsistent details. Their story changes. I got hurt over here on this machine, but you said you were hurt over here on this machine. But yeah, well, I got hurt, but then I limped over here and worked a little longer, right? Reported, again, we already said this, but reported after a weekend or a vacation. Refusal to attend appointments. This is a huge red flag. That means they don't want to be found out. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to go to the physical therapy. They don't want to go to their treating doctor exam or their designated doctor exam. Performance improvement plan or follow their improvement plan. The claimant could have been denied time off, and as a result of not getting the time off they wanted, they claimed an injury, so they got the time off they wanted, playing the system. And a history of workers' compensation claim. Now, these red flags in and of themselves and by themselves does not mean that it was fraud, but it is an indicator, and it's an indicator that if you pay attention, we can, and flag it for us, or SIU, we can do something about it. I'll be followed by our director, Jamie Allen, who will go over beneficiary fraud.
So let's discuss beneficiary fraud. Let's explain the benefits available to beneficiaries if an employee dies due to a work-related injury in Texas. The employee's widow can receive benefits until they remarry with an annual notarized statement that is required to confirm their unmarried status. Dependent children may also receive benefits which are based on their age or student status. For dependents over 18, the system requires verification of enrollment in an accredited educational institution to continue receiving benefits. I would like to put an asterisk right here. We are not benefit experts, and this is not an exhaustive list of eligibility, so please contact the division if you have any questions or want to know more. For beneficiary fraud, a family member lies to receive benefits after employee's death at work. Here's a real example. In this case, a beneficiary had been submitting annual notarized statements reporting that she had not remarried and she was receiving almost $550 per week in benefits. However, a cousin of the deceased reported that she had in fact remarried. A marriage certificate from another state confirmed this information. It was discovered that the beneficiary had submitted false statements for over 5 years and fraudulently received more than $63,000 in benefits. Through multiple interviews with the beneficiary, she continued to deny being married. She then stated she felt like marriage in another state doesn't count. I guess what happens in Vegas doesn't just stay in Vegas. Here is another example of beneficiary fraud dealing with dependents. In this case, a beneficiary was receiving benefits on behalf of a child shared with the deceased employee. When the child turned 18 and enrolled in college, continued benefits were contingent on verification of enrollment in an accredited educational institution. The beneficiary submitted a letter on college letterhead, purportedly from the child's college, to satisfy this requirement. However, the verification letter was determined to be falsified, and as a result, the beneficiary fraudulently received $14,500 that she was not entitled to. This case demonstrates the importance of verifying documentation to prevent receiving benefits of workers' compensation that somebody may not be entitled to. This is a copy of the actual letter submitted. The claims adjuster saw too many red flags and contacted the Special Investigative Unit. The investigation and subsequent interview determined that the beneficiary had falsified the letter. This case began because the claims adjuster paid close attention to the details and reported the discrepancies. So here are some best practices for preventing workers' compensation fraud in Texas. First, it is important to educate employees at the time of injury. This includes discussing their responsibilities and the consequences of providing false information. Second, ask about secondary employment or other sources of income, since this can affect benefit eligibility and help prevent fraud. Finally, it is essential to keep detailed records. Accurate documentation of the injury, medical restrictions, and communications help protect both the employee and the employer, and provides clear evidence in a case of an investigation. We can't stress the importance of communication in preventing fraud in the workers' compensation system. It is important to get key information from the claimant's employer. This includes details about the claimant's pre-injury employment, any high-risk activities outside of work, and whether the employee is under a performance improvement plan. Next, the employer can engage with other staff who know the claimant. They can provide insight into the claimant's work habits, physical capabilities, and general behavior. Finally, maintain regular check-ins with the claimant. Consistent communication helps ensure compliance with restrictions, keeps the carrier informed, and helps identify any inconsistencies early. So let's review how the Texas Workers' Compensation Fraud Unit evaluates or triages a potential fraud case. We review all allegations that are received, and we assess whether the report is credible, whether the information provided is reliable and supported by facts. We also consider the timeliness of the report, since prompt reporting can affect the investigation and potential to prosecute. Another factor is the loss amount. Remember, it's all about the money, meaning the dollar amount of benefits has to be improperly received. We determine whether the situation meets the legal definition of fraud. We may not know this until we investigate further, but we review the information reported to us. The more information provided to us, the better. We think that the claimant may be working and drawing is not sufficient. What makes you think that? Is there surveillance that was conducted? Did the claimant make statements that they're working?
Thanks again for being with us here today. I'd like to also say thanks to everybody out there doing everything that you can to help us combat fraud in the workers' compensation system. This is a continued partnership between us here at DWC and you, and I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done. I also want to say that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at dwcfraud@tdi.texas.gov, or you can call us at 844-FRAUD-99. Again, thank you for being with us here today, and I'll see you on the next one.